Alright, so today I wanted to make this video about anarcho capitalism and why I think that it could work, and why I think that although when you hear about it you think that like hardly anyone, like maybe, obviously less than 1% of people would support it, but why a lot more people than you'd think, and I would say the majority uh, agree with parts or the majority of parts of it. But just getting right into it, I'm not going to read up too much on it just because there's so many intricate details that you'd have to go over. The video would be way too long. But basically, um, it's basically would be a system of not government, but of way of running society is in that you don't have a centralized state, which means no government, no police, no government-funded healthcare, none of that stuff. No gun control, no anything. And the reasoning for all this stuff is the basic fact that I don't think anyone can argue this. Anyone that argues this fact is crazy, but the government is inherently contradictory, or at least having a state, I guess is a better way of putting it, is inherently contradictory and unethical in that they can do things that a private citizen can't, in that taxation. I can't go up to a random person and take money from them, but the government can. Um, the government can also do things that if you get divorced, they can force you to pay child support. If you can't afford it, they can take your car, they can take your house. It's basically just stuff like that that they have the power to do that the average person doesn't do. And that's inherently contradictory in that if you have an ethical or moral theory, it has to be universal to make sense. And then obviously it doesn't, it's not, the current way of doing things is not morally or ethical universal in any way, shape, or form. So basically, just kind of getting into it a little bit, law enforcement, courts, and any forms of security would be done through privately funded competitors. There'd probably be in that two or three or four major ones that would compete for business, and the best one would win. So there wouldn't necessarily be police, but people would ask, well, what would happen if someone broke a law? Number one is that people would be a lot less likely to break the law because if you broke the law in an anarcho-capitalist system, you would be. It depends. If you broke it in a, like, if let's say you killed someone or you raped someone, or something very very extreme, you would be basically banished from society. You wouldn't be able to get gas. You wouldn't be able to buy groceries, any of that kind of stuff. And for anyone who says that, oh well, people will just steal it, that's I think that that's a very bad argument. In that in an anarcho-capitalist society, people would be armed a lot more, and if you're that kind of person and you killed that person, well, nothing would happen. No one would care. People would probably be proud of you. Um, Not only that, it's also not really a good argument in the fact that if you ask someone who's, let's say they get sentenced to a jail sentence, doesn't matter what for, but it's something major, would you rather be forced to go live in the woods and have a tracker placed inside you, and if you come back into society and disrupt anyone in any way, you'll be killed, or probably killed at least at some point, or go to jail? I think 99% of people would choose go to jail. So it's not really a good argument to say that the way we're currently doing it is better. If you want to acknowledge the way we're currently doing it is very, very bad, then go ahead, but that's kind of a contradictory point in that. Um, Healthcare would be funded through either insurance and or charity. And for people who would say that, well, how are we ever going to pay for that? Number one, you're probably saying that you and the people you hang around with are so immoral and unethical that you'd be perfectly fine sitting there and just watching people die. And studies show that about 60-65% of health ailments are not genetic, or basically it's brought on, but it's habitual stuff that you bring on yourself, like obesity, smoking, all that kind of stuff. So if you were to bear the burden of those kind of health issues, then people would be a lot less likely to do it to begin with, which means that healthcare in an anarcho-capitalist system would be a lot cheaper. Not only that, too, there'd be much more competition for drug companies, which are basically a monopoly in the U.S., and I know Canada, it's a little more free market, but the U.S., all these kind of places, so those prices would come down. Regulations for doctors and all that kind of stuff would come down, so that the price of basically everything involved would come down, and people would be less likely to get sick to begin with, which means health insurance would be way cheaper. So even unless you're dirt poor, you could afford health insurance, even for maybe not like extensive coverage, but even a good basic coverage. And like I said, all you're saying is that if you don't think that healthcare could be funded through charity and or insurance, again, all you're saying is that you and the people you hang around with would be too immoral and unethical to give a couple bucks to help that person in need. And you think that people are so immoral that they need to be forced to contribute to healthcare. And it contradicts the problem. What you see with these people who argue against the anarcho-capitalism, generally they contradict themselves within contradicting themselves. They'll generally be critical of you saying that people are overly unethical in one area, but then they'll say that we need government-funded healthcare because if you don't, well, no one's going to pay for it, which is saying that people are horribly unethical. So, yeah. Schools would not be government-funded. There would be private schools that would compete for people's work, and again, there would be a lot less regulation, a lot less bureaucracy, which means the poor could afford school, and there'd be charity for that kind of stuff. So that's kind of getting right into it, but the basic reason I wanted to talk about is that why most people would agree, at least in some forms, that it would work. Now, I'm not saying that it would work 100% for sure. My position is that we should gradually go towards a system like this, and if it keeps working along the way, then we continue going. So that's kind of the big qualm I have with libertarians and like the really, really principled libertarians is that, and some anarchists, is that their way of going about things is that if we can't get a form of society that's 100% the way we want it, then there's no point in even trying. Which is why they're always against like a more like a print like a Trump is a good example. Why most of them are against that is that they think that you need to get all the way or it's not even worth trying. But the real way you're going to do it is to slowly wean people off. And this is the perfect example. If you want to quit something you're addicted to, going cold turkey, it could work, but it's much less likely to work than if you slowly wean yourself off. So that's why we need to slowly wean ourselves off the welfare, the government-funded health care, the public school system, which is so bad, all that kind of stuff, and go towards something like this. And I mean, it's going to work most of the way along. So if you really wanted it, then you wouldn't be fine, or you wouldn't be against going about it that way. But and why most people agree, this is a really big one. Most people on the left agree with this because if you see modern times, what is the left doing? Well, you see James O'Keefe has covered it to where banks are starting to not allow people who are affiliated with the Proud Boys, for example. I know that like Laura Loomer, Joe Biggs, people like that have been they've been not allowed to bank with certain people. And how would it work in an anarcho-capitalist society if you were convicted of a crime or something like that? Well, guess what? Banks wouldn't allow you to bank with them. So it's exactly the same thing that an anarcho-capitalist system advocates is what the left is doing now. So when people say that, oh, no, that would never work, and they give you all the scare examples of, oh, poor people will die, there'll be crime everywhere, well, then why are they doing the exact same thing that an anarcho-capitalist would advocate for, just maybe not quite to the same level? Another example of this is the left. Well, what happens when a libertarian or right-wing thinker wants to go talk on a college campus. They don't allow that. What happens if they want, YouTube channels even? They demonetize, they kick you off if you do the slightest thing wrong, all the while allowing their own people to do whatever they want most of the time. Um, so if you're on the left, or even a lot of moderates, you don't disagree with this way of running society. You think that ostracizing people from society is a way of changing behavior in the long run and making society better. So for all the people that say that that way of thinking would never work, where are you when going after these people on the left that are not allowing people to have bank accounts, not allowing them to have YouTube channels, harassing them in public? I know the big news story out there right now is the Vox guy going after Steven Crowder. And what did he say to not Steven Crowder individually, I don't think, but conservatives in general, is that when they're in public, he even tweeted it, harass them. I know it's popular now to throw milkshakes on people. He said, yeah, throw milkshakes on them, all this kind of stuff. So you have the people on the furthest left possible, the people that technically are the furthest away from an anarcho-capitalist system, that agree with much of it. So that's kind of all I wanted to point it out, in that all the people that say, oh, no, 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 that would never work, and they give you the horror, this and that horror story, I think it would work. Like I said, my way of doing it would be to gradually go towards it, to slowly wean people off it, which doing that would inevitably show people that, yeah, we don't need government-funded healthcare. We don't need public schools that are... Speaking of public schools, the main reason people are against this kind of thing is that they've spent 20 years of their life usually, or if not close to it, 15 to 20, I guess is the better way of putting it, in a system that is solely provided by the exact opposite of that. So they've spent, 15 years of their life. I mean, it would be the equivalent to someone growing up in a fundamentalist Christian or a fundamentalist Muslim family, never ever once exposed to anything other than that. Let's say they were homeschooled, they weren't allowed to have friends, they were basically stuck to their own house, and then hearing something else. This is what happens when people hear this kind of stuff. 99.999% of people have never done more than read a couple tweets or a YouTube clip on this kind of stuff. They have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. So just wanted to point that out. People always talk about how if you want to be informed nowadays, you have to get a balanced view of things. But reality, the view that 99%, or the view that we get 99% of the time is left, it's socialist. It's the exact opposite of these kind of systems, like public school, cable news, even the Google, YouTube, all these kind of things are demonetizing wrong-think, right-wing, more libertarian stuff, and they're promoting the heck out of the mainstream media and the leftist creators. So I just wanted to point that out for everyone who thinks that they've got a balanced view of things, even though that they probably have not even came close to getting a balanced view of things. But that's about all as far as this video goes. Just wanted to make a video about that. So if you liked it, make sure to hit that like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more.